Hi, I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be: is it wise or delusional for men to love women unconditionally? Well, I would say there's some caveats to that. As the late, great Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. Love unconditionally, but verify that your girl is actually being loyal. You should always be this way with everybody, not just your woman. If you have business partners, because oftentimes you'll have business partners and some of the guys are really good with numbers and money, and other guys are just terrible with that stuff. If you're one of those guys that's not good with numbers and money and you let your other partners handle things, you should always look at the bank statements. You should always be looking at your profit and loss, your balance sheet, your income statement. You should be looking through the transactions that are in there, because when you don't, that's when you really can get screwed out of your money. If you're in a relationship with somebody, same thing. You should be always looking and seeing what's going on with your bank accounts, what's going on with your retirement accounts, what's going on with your expenses, where is the money going, how is it being spent. That is just smart behavior. Because if you don't, if you're in business, maybe it's not one of your business partners, but you find out one of your employees is stealing from you. And so it's super important that you trust, but you verify, even with the people that are closest to you, even with your business partners, even with your girlfriend or your wife, especially first few years you guys are together. It's like, you want to know, can you trust her? Is she good with money? Because there are some women, it's like you give them access to your bank account. It's like they'll spend every dime that's in there. So you got to think in terms of that. What's your downside risk? Always know what your downside risk is. And so with those caveats, let's go through this email. He says, Corey, just wanted to reach out and say thanks. It's been a long while since the last time I read your book. I've been married for 23 years. I'm 47 years old. And after a breakup with my wife, I found you, I read your book, and applied the no contact rule, and everything worked out great. So thank you for that. So whatever happened, he was with his wife for 23 years. Sound like she didn't want to be married anymore. He started implementing what was in the book. He went no contact, probably started dating and meeting new women. And his wife learned really quick that he was going to sit around with his thumb up his ass. He was going to move on. He says, I thought I was a 3% man, probably was for a long time, but funny how all of a sudden complacency creeps in. Yeah, it doesn't happen in a couple of days or a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, especially when you've been together 23 years. He turned things around. Maybe it was 6 months, maybe it was a year or two before he slid back into his old patterns. It's like the analogy with the frog and the pot of boiling water. If you drop a frog into a pot of warm water and then slowly turn up the heat, he'll just stay in there and boil to death. But if you have a pot of boiling water and you drop a frog in it, he's going to jump right out. But it's like all of us are kind of like sitting in the warm pot. It's like, oh, this is pretty comfortable. This is a nice jacuzzi. He's like, and you're like, woo, it's getting a little warm in here, but it's all right. Yeah, I can just, woo, it's getting pretty hot. Maybe we should get out in a minute or two. And then you're just like, oh, wow. And then poof, you get boiled frog soup then. And that's not good. He says, fortunately, I caught it quickly. I reread the book again and definitely feel like it was a lifesaver. And I was able to sidestep some disastrous behavior. And I definitely need to be more conscientious about constant courtship and monitoring my wife's attraction level. Well, the courtship never ends in a relationship, and that includes a marriage. What you do to get her is what you do to keep her. And unfortunately, most men in long-term relationships stop dating and courting women. That's one of the biggest complaints women have about men, is that, hey, the guy was romantic at first, then once we got married, or we moved in, or we got serious, he just stopped all the romantic stuff. He never took me out on dates. I would complain. He would tell me he didn't want to spend the money. We got this, we got that. He'd make excuses. And then she starts talking to the guy at work or the next door neighbor, and he actually listens to her, actually makes her feel heard and understood like you used to. And then she starts moving away from him and moving away from you and moving towards some other guy. But if you trust, you love unconditionally, but you verify, because again, 3% man, there's a attraction level table in here. It's the chapter, it's all in the numbers, where I break down what women do based on their attraction and their interest. And you should always be aware of that. You should pay attention to that and understand that all of us get complacent, including yours truly, the longer you're in a relationship. And so if you accept the premise that you're going to get complacent at some point, you're probably going to slack off, you're probably not going to date and court her as much, you're probably not going to take the extra time that you used to make her feel heard and understood. And so what's going to happen is her attraction is going to drop. And then so the key is what happens? What does she do? How does she change in her behavior towards you when her attraction for you and the respect drops? Now, if you've made a good choice and you married a woman who was loyal and has integrity, she's going to let you know that things aren't going well. But if you were Captain Save-A-Ho, or you married a girl that displayed a lot of disloyal behavior when she was unhappy, then when she's unhappy now, she'll typically invite attention from other men to make up for it. And that's not good. Because the number one most important thing to us guys in a relationship is loyalty. And so this is part of the vetting process. But here, this guy's been with this woman for 23 years. So he's made his choice. He's in it to win it. He's multiple decades. And so it's easy for some incel that's never even gotten his dick wet before to go, oh, just dump her, dude. It's like, shut up. So in this guy's case, we're assuming, because he doesn't say anything about other men sliding into her DMs or anything like that, it's just that obviously she's not happy. In this case, he noticed that her attraction has dropped. And it's good, so it tells me that his awareness has been heightened, and it didn't get as bad as it did the first time, to where she was just ready to tap out and break up and end the marriage. Which, when that happened, he read my book, he applied what was in there, started being attractive to his wife again, and then she quickly became re-attracted. They got back together, and they lived happily ever after until he got lazy and complacent again. He says, being in a long-term relationship, I can't stress enough to others about a comment you made at the ending of the book. To love someone unconditionally is all about giving, not receiving. Well, love is allowing. Love is allowing the other person to love you. Because if you don't think you're worthy, or you don't think you're valuable, then you're going to presuppose that the other person doesn't love you. And what will happen is you will not allow them to love you. No matter how much they tell you they love you or they do things for you, you're always going to be suspicious, because you're presupposing and coming from the place of, oh, she's going to break my heart. She's going to hurt me. She's not going to love me. And so you won't believe the things she says. You won't believe the things she does. You even sometimes will be accusatory that there's something inappropriate going on when there's not, just because you presuppose bad things, because deep down you don't feel you deserve to be there. You don't feel you're deserving and worthy of her love. And so a big part of loving someone, and what is love, it's allowing the other person to love us instead of chasing them out of our lives because we don't believe they will love us willingly. You're creating the space to where she can come to you at her pace, pursue you, do most of the chasing, calling, texting, pursuing, affection, all those things. If you love her and you love yourself and you allow her to love you, that's the conditions where she's going to do most of the pursuing. But if you don't think you're worthy of love, you're always going to be over pursuing and not allowing her to love you. You're going to smother her. And then you get the, oh, there's no chemistry, there's no spark, I need space. You hear those kinds of things. And so the other thing about love is an act. You go to a relationship to give. You're in relationships with your closest friends because you're there to give, because you genuinely love and care for them, and vice versa. They reciprocate as well. And when you have a healthy relationship, you give unconditionally. It's a gift from your heart, and you don't expect anything back. But because you made a good choice, you get, in other words, this is part of the verification process. You look at their actions, and even though you give unconditionally, you also want to notice, is she reciprocating to me unconditionally as well? In other words, is she giving? Does she reciprocate? Or is she a one-way J where you're loving and you're giving to her, but it's not coming back? Because there are also some women that are not givers. There are also people in business. It's the interesting thing that I learned in real estate and about referrals is that there were lots of people, oh, I'm going to refer you my boss, my aunt, my uncle. I got so many people I know. I can send you so much business. And then after you have your closing, it's like they never refer anybody to you. And then you'll have somebody that was nice, they were respectful, you had a good transaction, and it's like every other week you got Bob told me to call you. It's like they send you tons of people. And so what you start to realize is that there are some people that are givers and there's some people that are takers. You give to a giver, the giver gives back. In other words, you give more time and attention to your clients who already are referring you other people, and you do nice things for them and you stay in touch, you have a friendship with them, they're going to give even more. But you could have somebody else that is a taker, and the more you give, they do nothing but suck. In other words, they just take all the time. They never give anything back. And so that's another thing that you should pay attention to in the vetting process. Is she giving back? Am I in a relationship with somebody that is also a giver? It's delusional to just love unconditionally and just assume that she's going to love you back. I saw there's this I can't remember the guy's name, and he does a pretty good job. They do like interviews on the street. And so I remember there was one I just saw a couple weeks ago. There was this older couple, and it's like young guys, and he's like, "Hey, how long you guys been together?" And he's like, "Oh, we've been together 47 years." And they look like they're in their 70s. The guy's got a big gizzard hanging off his neck or whatever. And so he's like, "Oh, we're doing an experiment. How do you guys trust each other?" And they're like, "Well," he's like, "Yeah, well, of course." And he's like, "Well, why don't you guys open your cell phones and then exchange them and then look through each other's messages?" So they do that, and they give each other their phones. And so the guy starts, looking through his wife's phone, and there's like this dude in there. I think his name's Larry or something like that. And then the interviewer's like, "Well, who's Larry?" And then you can tell the wife is, I think it's somebody from work. And, she's kind of, you can tell she's stalling a little bit. She's a little shocked, wasn't expecting this to happen. And then the look in the husband's face is like, and then he's looking through the DMs or the messages between this Larry guy, and obviously he sees something in there he doesn't like that doesn't make her look good. And it was like a 47-year marriage, and that guy, he loved unconditionally and he trusted unconditionally, and that's just kind of stupid. Extreme example of that in business. You ever heard of the artist Billy Joel? Guy was very famous. He was like in the 70s and the early 80s. Is like his songs are always on the radio. And if Piano Man, he's the Piano Man guy. Play us a song, you're the Piano Man. Made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions in songs and albums sold. One of the biggest acts in the world. And I remember I saw this. It was like VH1's Behind the Music that was did a documentary. And so his business manager was his brother-in-law from like his first marriage. He trusted this guy unconditionally, totally implicit. We're family, right? Family would never screw me over. And so one time, this is like in the early 90s, he's got kids. He's, all of his big hits have happened. I mean, his albums still do well. He's putting out, but not like they had done when he was younger. And so he was going to pay something. His credit card didn't work or whatever. Or the bank's like, there's not enough money in the bank account to cover that. And he's like, what? I've got hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what he's thinking. And so he goes and he does some research, finds out, well, that bank account's kind of empty. And then he's like, goes and looks in safety deposit boxes of his, and he sees all these IOU papers. And so what he came to find out was that his business manager, his former brother-in-law from his first marriage, had basically pissed all of his fucking money away on bad investments and just kept IOU. And so he would lose a bunch of money on one thing, get really like, oh shit, I lost all this money. And then he would take on an even riskier investment and then lose even more money. And then he basically fleeced Billy Joel for everything. And he's thinking, I got kids that I'm expecting to send off to college and everything. He's like, I don't have a pot to piss in. My whole career, all my earnings are completely gone because he trusted his business manager. He didn't look at his books. He didn't look at his bank statements. He didn't look at his own numbers. It wasn't until he got smacked up against the face with reality that his credit card didn't work, or he wrote a check and it bounced or whatever, and then he started looking into all his finances and checking his bank accounts, and he realized all the money was gone. Everything. All of his major earnings, everything was completely gone. And there were handwritten IOUs all over town, all the different banks and stuff. He went to safety deposit boxes that used to have lots of money and gold and stuff in there. And everything's gone. There's just IOU papers in there. And he was like, fuck. He couldn't believe it. He trusted, but he failed to verify. He loved unconditionally and didn't verify, which you could look at that and go, well, that's pretty stupid. But it was family. You don't expect things like that to happen with family, but it did. The guy was not good with money. And, he had to start all over again. He was like almost bankrupt. And he turned things around, but that's pretty shocking because at that point, I think he was in his like late 40s, probably late 40s, early 50s, because this happened in the 1990s. It was like 25 years ago. I think Billy Joel's in his 70s now. So you can imagine, it's like you've had your big career. You're thinking, hey, I'm in my late 40s, early 50s. Now it's time to coast in life. I've made all this money. I'm set. I'm going to be farting through silk the rest of my life. This is great. And then come to find out you're pretty much broke. So those things are going to happen. There are bad people out there, even people that are closest to you. So like Reagan said, trust but verify. And that's what this guy should be doing here. So back to the emailer, he says, being in a long-term relationship, I can't stress enough to others about a comment you made at the ending of the book. To love someone unconditionally is all about giving, not receiving. Well, in the receiving, you should verify. Because if they truly love you, they will give back. And if you're with a giver, the giver will give back. The taker will just take. Like Billy Joel's former business manager, he was a fucking taker. And he took and took and took until he took every single penny that he had. Give more. Receive more. That's only if you're in a relationship with a giver. If you give more to a taker, they'll just continue to take and you get nothing back. They're a giant black hole energy vampire. If you focus on the problem, you're focusing on the wrong thing. This seems totally counterproductive when you're going through it, but yet it's so true. Well, fear and hurt imprison the heart. Speak from the heart and don't hold anything back. It's better to be brutally honest with people than politically correct, because you can't solve problems unless you can talk openly and honestly about them. He says, not keeping this clear and constant, you could easily fall into her trap. Like you said, you're not going to win a fight with your wife anyways. Your approach kept me centered and opened her right up, and I will not lose this focus again. Thanks for saving my ass again. I greatly appreciate you, and thank you for having such a positive impact on my life. And so in this case, like what he was talking about is he was with his wife and he's feeling like she doesn't care, or he's upset with something that he did, and he remembers love is allowing, love is about giving, it's an act, you're there to give. And so even though he's pissed and he's irritated with her, instead of focusing on that, which would make that expand, he's like, let me find out what's going on. Ladies first anyways, you want to open her up. Because when a woman feels heard and understood, the legs open. And when she doesn't, the legs close. So if he comes to a point where he's having friction with his lady, like he did here, if he shows up and he's pissed and he's irritated and he's accusatory, then of course she's going to shut down and they're going to get into a conflict. But if he says, you know what, let me ask questions, because the quality of your life and all of your relationships is in direct proportion to the quality of the questions that you consistently ask yourself and those that you're in a relationship with. Just like, back to Billy Joel. If he'd asked some better quality questions, and if he'd have looked at his numbers and his bank statements and verified, that shit would have never happened. But he didn't do it, and he learned an extremely expensive lesson there. Somebody as successful as that, one of the most successful artists in the world at the time, got completely fleeced by his former brother-in-law because he didn't verify. And this guy was family. That's why he trusted me. We're family. You didn't do anything to screw me. And most guys are like, hey, this is This is my wife. We've been like the other guy for 47 years. She wouldn't screw me. Come to find out, she's been doing some naughty things. I don't know how far it went because the video ended, but the look in that guy's face was like, he was shocked. He was like, he did not like what he was reading. You know, he was completely like, oh yeah, we've been together 47 years. It's like, I'm going to my grave. This is going to be my ride or die. And come to find out, you know, oh, Larry, oh, he's a friend from work. Larry, the friend from work. He didn't bother to... So, like, you know, you look for guilty behavior. Is she constantly putting her phone face down? Is she constantly on the phone and texting people and you have no idea who she's corresponding with? When you see those kinds of things, that's part of the verification process. She's not being present with you. It's like, oh, hey, who are you talking to? Oh, just a friend from work. Oh, really? Who? Anybody I know? Oh, no. One of the guys from work. Really? 10 o'clock at night and you're corresponding with one of the guys from work? About what? Oh, just business stuff. Oh, really? Oh, let me see. What are you guys talking about? Oh, no, it's business stuff. Like, you know, that's how things come up. You're like, why don't you want to? Why are you kind of like? It seems like you got something to hide. Why don't you want to tell me about who this person is you're corresponding with at 10 o'clock at night? I was like, what's going on? Like if I was corresponding with somebody at work at 11 o'clock at night, especially if it was a woman. Would you be a little like, who's that? Why 11 o'clock at night are you corresponding with some girl from work? It's like, hello. So you got to ask questions. It's like you see something that's a little dodgy. Don't come from an accusatory place. Say, I'm going to trust that she's, it's a completely innocent explanation until I find out it's not so innocent. And so you assume that, oh, maybe it's just a misunderstanding or it's an innocent thing that happened. But you got to ask the question. You got to verify that what she's telling you. And, like I was talking about, the couple that got approached and they switched the phones, the woman, she's like, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I want my phone back. She actually said that. You're like, that poor bastard, 47 fucking years married to her. I don't know how many years they were together, but they were married for 47 years. And obviously there's something going on. There was something in the phone. He had no idea because he never verified. He just completely trusted it unconditionally. When you trust unconditionally, when you love unconditionally in any relationship, you're just creating the conditions where somebody can screw you over because you're just not paying attention. You will get fleeced. That's definitely something to think about. Trust, but verify, always. So if you got a question or challenge and you'd like to get my help, go to understandingrelationships.com, click the products tab at the top of your screen, and book a coaching session with yours truly. Until next time, I will talk to you soon.